Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Town of Los Gatos Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, March 23rd, 2016. The meeting is now called to order. Please take a moment to silence your devices. Mr. Paulson, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Hudis?
Here.
Commissioner Birch?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Vice Chair Kane?
Here.
And Chair Badami?
Here. Would everyone please stand and join Commissioner Hanson as she leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Town of Los Gatos strongly encourages public participation with verbal and written comments. To speak on any item, please complete a speaker's card located within the benches and follow the instructions on the back of the card. Matters relating to agenda items will be heard during the itemized public hearing. Matters not on the agenda will be heard under verbal communications. We have a desk item tonight. Have the commissioners had an opportunity to read the correspondence? Yes? All right, we do not have any requested continuances this evening. However, I will be looking to planning commissioners for a subcommittee report, and for the public, planning commissioners serve on various town committees in addition to their service on the commission. And I do believe we have a historical preservation committee report coming up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Historical Preservation Committee met tonight with Chairperson Bob Cowan, Vice Chair Catherine Janoff, Len Pacheco, Commissioner O'Donnell, and myself. We reviewed 4 applications. 131 Johnson Avenue was approved. They came in and were looking for guidance, so there was no motion, and favorable guidance was given to their design as they have it right now, and they'll be coming back. 246 University, requesting approval to replace existing wood windows with clad and French doors. It may sound minor, but those historic buildings, the committee is very careful about any modifications made to those buildings. This application was approved. 136 Tate came back for an approval of a modification of a prior approval, and they got another approval. The design was good, and the vote was unanimous. 104 University Avenue, requesting new railings to be put on the elevated patios. We approved that with conditions on the design, not the least of which was safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kane. Are there any other reports that commissioners have to share this evening? Seeing none, we will move on to verbal communications, and I do have one card from Angelia Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove, and I'm just going to take a minute. Next week, you've got a really wonderful, horrible, depending on which perspective you're looking at, meeting on the 30th. And, you know, I just wanted to say there's going to be a ton of people, so you're going to need a whole bunch of these cards there. And I was wondering, or just suggesting, if maybe in connection with the staff report, it might be extremely helpful to the multitude of people out there who are just now getting interested in understanding what's going on, to have a little bit of background in the staff report, or maybe some appendices that are easy for them to be brought up to date on, gee, this has been 20 years, maybe how many people cumulatively have spent tremendous amount of times on this over the years.
Excuse me, it would be helpful if you told us what that project was.
Oh my goodness, you don't know?
I'm not sure.
The North 40.
Oh, that one, okay.
Yeah. It's the little one that's out there in the lobby. But anyway, there's going to be a lot of people, and I think there's so much confusion out there amongst the residents as to how did this happen without us knowing. That's on one extreme. The other extreme is it's a done deal. Why are they even having meetings? Because, you know, the town council approved everything and we don't understand how it got done. So it's really all over the board, and maybe even just an introductory 10 minutes at the beginning of the meeting where maybe Mr. Paulson or someone can just say, hey, here's the process going forward. The specific plan means this. This is sort of what it was all about. You don't have to go through all the details, but it's what it was all about. And here we are in the process, and just maybe a general overview on how the process is going to go forward. I just think it would make everyone's visit here a lot more beneficial, and your time with them more beneficial. And it's our opportunity to get more people involved in this process, not just on this project, but all others in the town. So take advantage of their attendance. Thank you.
Ms. Dorner, thank you for your comments. Mr. Paulson, I believe you took note of the comments from Ms. Dorner.
I noted the requests.
Thank you. We're moving on to our consent calendar, and that would be item number 1, approval for minutes for March 9th of 2016. Do we have a motion to approve? Commissioner Birch?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as provided in our packet.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Hudes?
Second.
I just have a quick question on those minutes, and maybe the commissioners can refresh my memory. But my recollection was that Commissioner O'Donnell made the motion to deny the subdivision application for Union Avenue, and not Commissioner Kane. Do either of you?
Do I lose that lead?
No, we just need to correct the minutes.
Have the byline, though. I think you're correct.
All right. Then I will be supporting the motion as long as we make a correction to the minutes that it was Commissioner O'Donnell that made the motion rather than Vice Chair Kane. All right. So I will call the question. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. All right. We do not have any continued public hearings this evening. We will be moving over to item number 2, which is 35 North Santa Cruz Avenue, Architecture and Site Application S-16-007, requesting approval of exterior modifications to a pre-1941 commercial building on property zoned C2, APN 510-44-032. May I have a show of hands from commissioners who have visited the site? Are there any disclosures from commissioners? Ms. Walters, I understand you're providing the staff report this evening. I'm sorry, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say, I was just disappointed that I couldn't get inside.
I think we all were. Thank you. All right, Ms. Walters, we're ready for your staff report.
Great. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. This project's located at 35 North Santa Cruz Avenue on the west side of North Santa Cruz Avenue between West Main Street and Bean Street. On January 13th, as you recall, Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit to allow a formula retail candy store, Lolly and Pops. The tenant space was formerly the Pal's Sweet Shop. Tonight, the application is proposing to modify the storefront of the tenant space. This space is one of 5 tenant spaces of a building that was originally built in 1916. Throughout the years, this storefront has been modified, and as recently as 1996, the storefront facade has been modified. The proposed design is intended to upgrade the storefront with classical contemporary style while complementing the surrounding architecture. Features will include a wood-paneled storefronts and piers, 2 sales windows, double recessed doors, divided transom windows, frosted glass, double layers of wood cornice, and striped awnings. At the January 27th Historic Preservation Committee meeting, the item was reviewed, recommendations were made, and the applicant came back on February 11th and made those modifications to color and awnings. And at that time, the HPC recommended that Planning Commission approve the plans for the exterior modifications. Staff has received 1 comment from the public, which is included in tonight's desk item. So if anybody has any questions, please, I'm available.
Thank you, Ms. Walters. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Hudes?
I had a few questions. The first question has to do with, it looks like 33 and 35 North Santa Cruz are twin buildings, and I wondered if, in your opinion, the fact that they're twins has any historical or characteristic implications.
So you are correct that the style of the architecture for those 2 tenant sites mirror each other, and that used to be a combined tenant space of one space, and then a wall was introduced in the center to create two divided spaces. But through staff's research and seeing the different, how the modifications to the facade have changed throughout the years, that wasn't something consistent, was a more modern addition.
Commissioner Hudes?
Just one other question. I notice in the report of the Historic Preservation Committee that they are requiring striped awnings, and I wondered if there was some background on that as to why that's required and whether the applicant expressed any opinions to staff about that.
Yes, the applicant provided requested striped awnings, and then I believe the only conversation was a color change with regards to that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Kane?
Have you had a chance to review the letter from desk item tonight, the letter from Lee Quintana?
Yes.
She makes a lot of references to town code, things we should have done that maybe we didn't do. What was your view of the letter? Did you find items in here we could do something better?
In staff's opinion, based on the commercial design guidelines and the recommendation from HPC, staff felt that the recommended proposal would satisfy our requirements and meet the standards.
She makes a good case for keeping that area, that revered sacred area of historic downtown, that it should remain looking historic. I find merit to that, but I was also here when we approved Apple. And do we have exceptions for, say, special branding?
Mr. Paulson?
So we don't have exceptions for special branding. That is something that can be taken into consideration by anybody. I don't believe that the Apple store was historic, but I don't know that for sure. There are some areas that are historic, some buildings that are historic, some that aren't. But regardless, ultimately the Planning Commission, the Historic Preservation Committee obviously weighs in on the historic aspects. And so with their comfort and recommendation for approval, staff is comfortable with that. But should the Planning Commission decide differently, then they could make a different choice.
What I'm getting at is preserving the downtown is, of course, very, very important. What we heard from the Candyman was that what he had to display was branding on his part. And I thought, well, so what? But then I thought of Apple, and everything they have is branding because their stores all look similar. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, maybe there's room for discretion. What is staff's opinion on that?
Well, there's always room for discretion. This is a discretionary action. So you can have that discretion and use it. Again, this went to Historic Preservation Committee, which I believe you sit on. So staff is under the assumption that that was fully vetted. I wasn't at those meetings, at the two meetings that were held earlier this year, and so staff is comfortable with the proposal.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudes?
What were the recommendations of the Historic Preservation Committee incorporated in the current version that we're looking at?
Yes, they have been corrected and modified to meet those recommendations.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Walters. All right, we will now open the public testimony portion of the public hearing and allow the applicant and their team 10 minutes to address the commission. My first speaker card is David Friedman.
Hello again. Nice to see everyone. I guess I'm the Candyman, right? Thanks. Good to be back. We've enjoyed working with the community and working with the historic board. We've come away. Oh, we can show you what the rendering of the building that we're looking at. And actually, this is very different than our Lolly and Pops branded stores. We really paid a lot of attention to trying to continue the nostalgic feel of the store that was there before with Powell's, our store too. We wanted to do something that really that meant that would speak to the town and continue a feeling of nostalgia and classicness. And so most of our storefronts tend to be brighter and more of a, I don't know if you can see my bags of candy back, you might not be able to see that, but that's usually the color of our storefronts. And so this, we've definitely muted it down and just created a real classic feel. So we're hopeful that you'll approve this today. And that's all I really have. Anything, do you have any questions or?
Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you for your comments. And I appreciate the fact that you went to some effort to try and customize the storefront to our town. My question for you is, do you have any of your other stores in a very historic area like Los Gatos, or is this new territory?
This, for a street, this is our very first street store. We're in regional malls around, and we actually are in Oak Ridge. We opened up oh gosh, a few weeks ago. So we are going to regional malls. We'll have one we're working on like Broadway Plaza and other malls, but this is our very first store in a street environment. So we were kind of excited to be able to design something that would fit so well on a street. And there you go.
And the store you're opening in Oak Ridge is going to have the more traditional design that you talked about with the brighter colors versus this look and feel that you created for Los Gatos.
That's true. This one will feel probably more classic and nostalgic than the Oak Ridge store is a little more of the modern, a little more contemporary.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hudes?
I just wondered whether there's any intention to have seating in the store as there was in Powell's?
Good question. I don't think so. We do have, there isn't any seating in this, but it's something I can take back and recommend. That was a nice feature of Powell's to have the little TV set and the Willy Wonka playing.
There may be requirements if you do that. So, but and I didn't see any on the plans, but I wanted to understand your intentions.
Right, no problem.
Anyone else? We do not have any speaker cards for members of the public. Actually, we will be getting one right now, and that would be from Ali Quintana as she fills out the card. Calling Lee Quintana. Okay.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I don't have much to say. I'm here to answer any questions you might have, but I would make a comment on Apple. Apple is an example of a more modern design that is consistent with the basic patterns of the historic district in general. It has horizontal lines and vertical lines, simple vertical columns on the side, as opposed to here you have introduced 4 additional vertical elements that none of the other stores on the street have, and it changes the affect, and it's not consistent with the historical, which I could show you on the photo that I included but didn't. And as for it, yes, it may meet the commercial design lines, etc., but we keep saying that we expect better, we insist on better. And while this is a big improvement over its sister next door, I think we can do better. And the branding can come from what they display in their window. And the other reason I did this is because I noticed when I walked down that street how many of the buildings had been remodeled. And so many of them that were remodeled use inferior materials and didn't really replicate the vertical and horizontal feeling. They used big blocks instead of multiple layers of small linear across the buildings. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Vice Chair Kane.
Ms. Quintana, you know that the design that we have now is not the original proposal from the applicant.
I know, the colors have changed.
We felt we'd made some improvements,
it was,
I guess it gets to a matter of opinion that we didn't make enough of an improvement. And I read your letter about a fun candy shop kind of thing, but since we do have discretion, you know, this is a kid's store, and Powell's was a magnet for kids, and it was fun, and you could watch Willy Wonka 95 times if you wanted to. And I think the HPC was leaning in that direction of the branding insofar as the kids, in the mind of the kids, that this was a fun place to come. And so I guess we exercised that discretion and thought we'd come up with not only with an improved design from what they had originally, but also a substantial improvement of what had been there before.
it's not clear to me from reading the minutes from the committee that anything besides color was addressed. Could you light me on that?
We meet on the fourth Wednesday of every month, and you are very, very welcome to come. There was a lot more discussed than just what was in the minutes. Commissioner O'Donnell, do you have a comment?
Yes, a lot more was discussed. We received your note, as usual, today shortly before the meeting. You were not present at the HPC. We received comments. We made changes. I think, having gone through that process twice and come before us now once, it's kind of late in the game, and I'm perfectly satisfied with what we've done so far. I think when we wait to the last possible moment, I'm waiting for you to get it in after a hearing sometime, it just takes away from the impact of anything you have to say. I did read your remarks, but I think they're late, and I think the HPC did a good job.
They are not late. They are within the limit of what's allowed, number one. And number two, I would love to attend every single meeting that this town has. That is absolutely impossible. So I rely on the minutes and what is in the staff report. And if that isn't enough information for me to reach the same conclusion that you have, then I want to speak out about it. And I think your minutes should reflect the changes that have been made and what has been discussed so the public can be informed. I spent a lot of time working on these things, and I am getting tired of people telling me I got it in too late for consideration. Comments from the public need to be considered whenever they are submitted, and especially desk items within the limits that are allowed.
I want you to know I considered your remarks. I read them today when they came up by email, and I read them again tonight when I saw them the first time in writing, so they have been considered.
All right, Vice Chair Kane.
I want to repeat that I value your input, and if it is possible for you to attend, you'd be a welcome member of the public, as would any member of the public. Historic Preservation Committee is a lot of fun. We meet on the fourth Wednesday of every month at 4 o'clock, and it would be lovely to see you there. Thank you.
Without complete minutes, there can't be transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quintana, for your comments. We appreciate them. All right, I don't have any speaker cards left for this item. I have a question from Commissioner Erickson. Is that for Ms. Quintana? Shall we call her back?
Yeah, it was actually for the speaker, not for the chair.
Okay, Ms. Quintana, we have a question for you.
So are there minor modifications that you could suggest to the design that would address the concerns that you've expressed? I mean,
I think I included them in my letter. My suggestion was to eliminate these verticals, enlarge the size of the windows, which is more consistent with this and more consistent with this. And one of my concerns when I was looking at other buildings, lots of the buildings that have been remodeled with these exterior pieces of molding have not held up very well, and they are in need of dire maintenance. But taking every building along that strip has vertical columns, either separating the buildings or separating the storefronts. They do not have other vertical elements.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thanks again, Ms. Quintana. All right, we will now give the applicant up to 5 minutes to add any further comments about the application. So, Mr. Friedman, you may approach the podium.
Hi. Thank you. I'm certainly, I'm not here to create controversy, but I do feel that we put a lot of time and energy and with help with the Historic Association Board to help us come up with a design that, is a nice blend to fit into the neighborhood, to really upgrade the building and create a really wonderful, nostalgic candy store experience. And hope that you'll agree. We're really excited to get our candy store open. We've had an amazing amount of people. This is unbelievable, this town. I'm so excited because so many people have been calling us and writing that they really miss Powell's and they can't wait till we open and when are we opening, and I just can't believe the outpouring of affection, and so we're just thrilled to be continuing this tradition in this town and creating some new ones for everyone. It's just it's a wonderful concept and store, and I think you'll love the improvements and anyway, if you're welcome if you have any questions.
Commissioner Hanson.
Hi, I was wondering if you could make a comment. Ms. Quintana brought up a good point about the durability of materials, and I remember having worked on a previous project with signs. The signs have shelf life of so many years, and they're resistant to certain kinds of temperatures. Could you comment on what might happen to these materials in, say, 5-7 years?
Well, we would be continuing to keep it. I head up the real estate, construction, and maintenance department, and maintenance is a huge issue for us. We really want to make sure that we keep this store in first-class condition. Most of our leases have, we have to do a full remodel in 5 years, but I'm sure we'll be maintaining this. We're all local. We all live, a lot of our people in our company live on the peninsula, and even some from Los Gatos. So it's going to have a pretty big microscope from our corporate offices and we're a Bay Area company, and so we'll be definitely keeping it. This, like I said, this is our first street store, so it is different weather environment than interior mall. So I'm sure we'll learn a lot too, but we want to keep it looking beautiful. This is a beautiful city, and we want to exemplify what is in Los Gatos. So we'll be. I hope that helped.
It did, thank you.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what I wanted to hear.
Okay.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you.
All right, we will now close the public testimony portion of the hearing and ask if any commissioners have questions, comments, a possible motion. Commissioner O'Donnell?
If there are no comments, I will make a motion. If there are comments, I'll defer. So if there are not any comments, I will move the approval of the request and find that the motion should find that the proposed project is categorically exempt as set forth in Exhibit 2. The findings are also set forth in Exhibit 2 regarding exterior modifications, which are to be found consistent with the commercial design guidelines. The finding also is that the project is consistent with the Central Los Gatos redevelopment plan, which is specified in Exhibit 2. The required considerations as required by Section 292150 of the Town Code for the approval of architectural and site application, and the approval of the architecture and site application S16007 with the conditions contained in Exhibit 3. Yeah. So that would be the motion.
All right, Commissioner Hanson?
I would second the motion.
All right, Commissioner Birch?
I am going to support the motion, and I just wanted to point out, thank you very much for the time that you spent. One of the items that the commission sometimes faces is this idea of branding that cannot be molded to fit the town look and feel. So I think that this is a great example of a company that has approached us and said, we want to work with you, and it's a good reminder for us that that is something that companies can do, and we can put them through the process with the HPC or other commissions that we all sit on and make sure that even if it's a formula retail store that comes into the town, that they fit our plan and our requirements.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Because I've worked with these people a while, because I'm on the Historical Preservation Committee, I found them to be very agreeable to our suggestions. They did make substantial changes. I remember the Apple situation, and it was quite a bit different than this one. So I just want to say they were very cooperative with us. They considered each of the 5 of us who made comments. I don't recall anyone in the audience making comments, but I just would say that they've been very receptive to people's comments. And so I have respected this applicant.
All right. Commissioner Hudes.
I will also be supporting the motion, and I wanted to commend the applicant for, I think, somewhat restoring the look of a building that had actually deviated from its historical look. And in my opinion, I think it's very pleasing architecture and also similar to the way the old Ford Cleaners at 29 looked and similar to the old car dealership, ancient car dealership across the street. And I think by removing the curved and peaked facade and going to the rectangular look, it's actually quite similar to some of the photographs that were provided in our report that had a long line of buildings with a rectangular facade. So I think this is a step forward or backward, however you look at it, in terms of historic preservation.
All right, further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights of the action of the Commission on this item?
There are appeal rights. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal that decision. The form's available in the clerk's office. There is a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Thank you. All right, we have a new public hearing, which is item number 3, 16491 South Kennedy Road, Architecture and Site Applications S-15-044, requesting approval to technically demolish an existing single-family residence, construct a new single-family residence that will exceed the maximum floor area and building height, and a grading permit on property zoned HR1, APN 532-17-035. May I have a show of hands from commissioners who have visited the site? Are there any disclosures from commissioners? Commissioner Hudes.
I had an incidental conversation with a neighbor, but not about the project.
Thank you, Commissioner Hudes. Ms. Walters, I understand you'll be providing the staff report this evening.
Yes, good evening. This subject hillside property is 4.4 acres and is located at 16491 South Kennedy. The site contains an existing 6,000 square foot single-family residence with an attached 1,170 square foot garage. In March of 2015, the building department issued a stop work order for work being done without permits on site. The stop work order was issued because all the exterior and interior wall materials of the house had been removed. That triggers a technical demolition of the project and would require an architecture and site application. Grading in the rear yard also occurred without approval of an architecture and site application for the grading permit. The property owner and the project architect have provided a project description as well as justification, a letter of justifications in Exhibit 5 and 6. The application is being considered by the Planning Commission tonight because the square footage of the residence will exceed the 6,000 square feet. Pursuant to the hillside development standards and guidelines, exceptions may be granted after carefully consider the constraints of the site. Staff supports this exception as the project is existing. The floor area has been reduced. The shell of the building remains. The project is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood as it exists, and the applicant again has reduced the overall square footage by reducing attic space as well as kitchen space and a existing pump house. Staff, the other exception being requested tonight for Planning Commission would be to exceed the maximum allowable building height. The existing and proposed two-story residence is 29 feet tall, where 25 feet is permitted in the hillside. Pursuant again to the hillside development standards and guidelines, Commission may grant exceptions after considering the site. Staff supports the exception of the building height as it's an existing condition. The shell exists, the roof exists on the home, and it is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. The applicant also has requested an exception to allow grading outside of the LRDA. The proposed rear yard retaining walls are located within an existing area of slopes that are greater than 30% and then are therefore outside of the LRDA. Staff supports this request within the western portion of the rear yard because the slope exists and the applicant is removing an existing 8-foot wall and introducing a tiered walls less than 5 feet, which are allowed by the hillside design guidelines. However, staff does not support requesting to grade outside of the LRDA on the western portion of the side. That's where the proposed cabana is located, as well as new retaining walls. Staff believes that the applicant could restore that grade on that side of the, the grading has already occurred, but staff believes the grading could be restored on that side of the slope, and the cabana and proposal of that area could be reduced. The other request that the applicant makes is an exception to exceeding the maximum allowable cut and fill. That's required also by the hillside design guidelines. And the eastern portion of the rear yard has been graded to accommodate a cabana as well as patio that would result in a combined cut and fill of over 6 feet, or 6 feet is allowed through our guidelines. Staff does not support that exception, again, because they feel that the eastern portion of the rear yard could be restored back to the original grade. This concludes staff's report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Walters. Commissioner Hanson?
I had a couple of questions. First was in Exhibit 6, which was a letter from the applicant, and they may need to comment on it, but they mentioned that they failed 3 planning commission reviews, and I don't believe this has come to the planning commission before. So my assumption was that they've gone back and forth with the planning department on the issues that were presented, because there were several exceptions requested to the hillside design guidelines, and there's the fact that the initial demolition work was done out of code and compliance.
That's correct. So you've not seen this application before, so that was an incorrect committee he was referencing. They've been to the staff technical review committee 6 times now. So we've been working with them for a year to get to the point where we are with the project.
So my next question was kind of related to it. So it seems like it's gotten to the point where it's all but just, a certain piece of it. So I was just trying to understand on the retaining wall. I can understand the issue with an 8-foot high retaining wall. It may not look the way they wanted it and whatnot. So let me just make sure I understand this. You mean the eastern portion or the western? There was one portion where you're okay with them making the grading and changing the retaining wall to a 2-tiered retaining wall, but in the other portion of the property, the recommendation would be to restore the grading and then do what?
So that's correct. Staff has looked at the site. As you've been out there, there's an existing 8-foot retaining wall back there that used to include a waterfall and an existing pool. The pool has been removed, the waterfall has been removed, and so in order to get the project closer to the hillside design guidelines, their proposal has been to create a tiered retaining wall at that portion. So it will reduce the height, it'll have natural materials on it, provide landscaping in between. On the other side where the proposed cabana is, that area was just simply graded to cut in to create a flat pad, and per the guidelines, staff was unable to make those findings.
Okay, and then one more question. On the cabana itself, the staff report indicated that the design of the cabana was in the guidelines, but then kind of digging into the grading issue, it sounded like grading had occurred that shouldn't have occurred relative to the cabana, or is that the retaining wall? I just want to make sure I got the facts right.
So as you've seen out in the site, grading has been done without permits. The the proposed plan that we received that shows when they applied for the application after the stop work order shows a proposed cabana. The cabana meets setback requirements, height requirements. It would match the proposed modification to the materials of the home, so there would be that compatibility. However, with that proposed cabana, in order to create it as proposed, it would exceed the required cuts.
So basically, the cabana and the retaining wall are violating the grading issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Vice Chair Kane?
Part of my problem with the application is the question of how did it get up there in the first place? It's like a poster child for our hillside guidelines where it says don't do this. Now, the house has huge square feet, but when you look at it, it goes way over to the right. We stood in the rain and watched this, and it goes way in both directions. And I figured that's more than 7,000 feet. But it's not, because it's comparatively thinner than you might expect other houses to be. So when I looked at the topography, and we have those very simple drawings in here where it says do this and don't do this, and the don't do this is you've got a slope, and some of it is 30% or more, and it's been cut this way and cut that way, and this corridor house was put in there. How did that happen?
So this home was built in 1982, and it preceded the hillside design guidelines, or hillside development standards and guidelines.
Did it give birth to the guidelines?
Not sure.
I would think, and I'm thinking if that's appreciated, then I'd be very sensitive about, following staff's guidance, and it doesn't seem like that happened. And it's a very curious project, and the information you've given us is very curious. Demos were, the issue here is a technical demo. Can you tell us what a technical demo is?
Yes, so the town code says that if you remove 50% of more contiguous wall area, coverings, meaning the interior and exterior, then it triggers a technical demolition. So although the walls are standing up out there and the roof is there, because the wall coverings have been removed greater than 50%, it's considered a new home by town code for planning.
So given that I have a house, which has the sensitivities of a guardian of the hillsides would look at and have problems with, given those sensitivities, what happened? They just started cutting and tearing and pulling and not telling anyone, or?
We could ask the applicant that.
I was assuming you had some discussions with them.
So we did. As the letter presents, the applicant hired someone that he felt was handling the permits, and there were no permits ever pulled.
Thank you. Commissioner Hudes.
Just as a factual matter, what percentage of the exterior wall was removed, or what percent is non-contiguous?
100%.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Commissioner Erickson.
So the grading, which has already occurred, that the staff is not recommending, did that occur prior to the engagement of the present contractor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanson? Okay. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just want to check the architect's suggestions, which are not too many. It's the letter of October 20th. Have those been adopted?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any further questions from commissioners? Commissioner Hudes.
The reasons for staff recommending denial, were they discussed with the applicant, and was the applicant just not willing to incorporate those kinds of changes?
Staff has worked a lot with the applicant. We've worked closely together with all departments. They're aware of all the exceptions being requested, and they've worked to minimize. They had, as the project report describes, they worked to create a project that gets as close to the hillside design guidelines as possible. However, with regards to the height, it's existing, the floor area is existing, The grading, we discussed at length, and they have modified the cabana as well as the grading, but this is where they came and wanted to propose it to Planning Commission.
Commissioner Hudes, one more question.
In your opinion, was the house as it was built in 1980s compliant with town code at that time?
It was. In fact, it received an architecture and site application from Planning Commission.
Okay. Vice Chair Kane, you had your hand up?
You said existing twice. We're talking about sustainability. We're talking about the hillside. Wouldn't this be a marvelous opportunity to have the house come into compliance with all of it, the size, the bulk, the height? Wouldn't this be a great opportunity to get back into compliance? And did you discuss that with the applicant?
We did, and they would like to proceed with, since the shell is there and the roof is still there, they would like to proceed, and that's why this application is forward tonight.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much, Ms. Walters. We will now open the public testimony portion of the hearing and allow the applicant and their team 10 minutes to address the commission. Our first speaker will be Sully McGrath.
Good evening, guys. We understand this is a tricky project. I took over for the homeowner, Robert, approximately 6 months ago to try to get it to where we're at now. I've been building homes here since 1992, been in this valley, been building for 30 years. We understand that the hillside has changed over the years. We have tried to create this project to meet the concurrent, the consistent, the current guidelines of hillside. It's a tricky project. It's over the size, the slope, the LRDA. We've tried to do as much as we could possibly do to bring this into a current project, to soften the hillside. It was an eyesore. It was white. It was a white elephant. You could see it from everywhere. We've softened everything possible. We've taken the LRV values to the softest we can. We've turned everything to try to disappear into the hillside. The facts of the matter are, the house is there. It's the height that is. It was built in 1982. It's totally different from 2004 when the hillsides were adopted. This isn't my first go-around with the planning on a property that we owned on Visit Monte, which I couldn't get approved. It's a different situation. The house is there. The size is there. The height is there. This gentleman did, in fact, break the rules. He started demo when he shouldn't have. He contacted the right team. He contacted me. I brought my team to the staff, to the table, to try to get this as close as we can to making everybody happy, to making the neighbors happy, to make this fit into the hillside. It's way better than it was. It was an eyesore before. There's a water pump station out in the front that sits on South Kennedy. That's an eyesore. It's consistently large. Shouldn't be there. We've eliminated that. We've eliminated the inside of the house to try to get rid of the attic space to bring down the overall girth of the property. But the fact of the matter is this house is there. It's been there since 1982. If this gentleman hadn't touched it, it would still be there in the same ugly shape that it was. We have done everything humanly possible to get this in to meet the hillside standards. I don't know what else we can do, from bringing the reflective value of the roof to the Venetian plaster on the outside, to bring in sourcing stone, to bring down the retaining walls to make them disappear into the hillside. We've changed out, which is impervious coverages was consistent right now, is concrete. It's not good for the hillside. We've changed that to impervious coverages for pavers so that it creates a better, better drainage. The hillside now is dangerous. We've imputed the retaining walls that don't meet the hillside standards now. There's a consistent height of 8 feet. It's not safe. We've changed that. We've brought it into the guidelines to bring 3-foot retaining walls tiered as the town requires and requests. The hill's now safer, it's stable, and we can't change what's there, but we can make it better. And I believe that's what we've done.
Thank you, Mr. Grath. Vice Chair Kane.
I think we are of a common mind to some degree. You called it a white elephant. I wouldn't do that. But this white elephant, what I'm getting at is your sincerity of trying to improve things, and also your savvy to know that this is a sensitive issue. You said as much. Given what it represents to us, why then ask for more exceptions? It's almost rhetorical. It's like, what are you thinking? This could be smooth sailing, except for a couple of things to which staff said no, and I don't know how I'm going to disagree with them on those points. You must know that. So to get these other, it seems to me, by comparison to the whole project, it's de minimis. There's a family at stake, there's a house at stake, and you want to cut more dirt, and you want to do this, and you want to do that. All you have to do is not do that, and then the white elephant lives.
Agreed. The fact of the matter is the dirt's already cut before I came to the playing field. And the fact of the matter is the height and the size is the size.
But the guy saying Red October, oh, you've lost another submarine? I mean, you made another cut without approval?
The facts are the facts. I mean,
all right.
The dirt's been cut. The dirt's been removed we think upwards of 50, 60 cubic yards.
Isn't staff asking you to put it back?
They have not yet. Now, this is, as of this meeting, we understand that there may be some concessions, and that's not an issue. If that's what it takes to get this gentleman moved back into his house, we understand that, and we'll deal with that. If the staff is reflecting and saying that they want the dirt to come back, we get it back to I guess the closest we can, based on a GSI map built in 1980. I guess we can try to follow that as closely as possible. The exceptions that we're asking for is a height exception, a size exception. Oh, I can't cut the house in half. I can't pick the house up and move it. It is what it is. It's there.
All right. Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you, and thank you for the nature of your report.
Sure.
Commissioner Erickson.
So when you were struggling with all this, I mean, you got an owner. If I understand this whole story, you've got an owner at stake. I mean, you got an owner that you're trying to satisfy. You've got a town you're trying to satisfy, and you've got sins of the past which you're paying for that you're not responsible for. So when you have you explored the possibility of locating the cabana in a different place or changing the size of it so that you could avoid what the staff is recommending against? And if you did, when you explored that, how did you think your way through that?
That's a good question, and that has just now been brought to our attention, and we're 100% willing to move it, exchange it, whatever we need to do to make it fit into making this application fly. We understand that it may need to be massaged a little bit. If it needs, at the end of the day, if it needs to be removed so we can get this gentleman moved into his house with his new family, then that's what we'll do. We're not dead solid here saying that this is the way it has to be. If we need to move it, we'll move it. If it needs to be removed, we'll remove it.
Commissioner Erickson.
Just a follow-up question to that. I don't want you to try to design, and this isn't a question asking you for a commitment, but it's within the realm of possibility with what you know that you might be able to relocate the cabana or change its size and restore the grading that was there before. It's possible, you think?
No, it's absolutely positive. It can happen, for sure.
Commissioner Birch.
I just want to clarify that you are not adjusting any of the roof line at all. The existing roof will remain as is. You will be just reworking with the existing exterior wall structure, and all the work that you're proposing with the house is happening on the interior portion of the house.
That's primarily correct. That's correct.
Okay.
The roof will remain, the height of the roof will remain, the pitch of the roof will remain, the exterior will remain. It hasn't been touched.
But it's essentially what I mean is like the roof planes as they are now
correct.
Are going to stay. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm just looking at the report, which I think you have a copy of, and I'm at the point right before the staff makes some recommendations. And on page 12, the last paragraph before the alternatives seemed rather simple to me. It said, while staff supports the height exception and the floor area exception, staff is recommending denial of the application because of the request to grade outside of the LRDA in the rear yard and the request to exceed the maximum combined cut and fill depth, 6 feet, for the development other than the main residence. So assuming for the moment that that is the staff's only reason for suggesting or recommending denial, if I hear you correctly, you're saying you can address those two issues?
Partially yes, partially no.
Oh, tell me the no.
Yes, there's an existing 8-foot retaining wall that's outside of the LRDA. It's not consistent with the current guidelines of the hillside. It doesn't meet the requirements. In order to make this hill safe and to make that wall safe, it has to be reduced in nature. It has to be reduced in size. The town now requires anything in a hillside standard to not be larger than 3 to 5 feet. There's no way to do, it's already outside the LRDA. The 8-foot is already outside the LRDA. And the only way you need an exception to make it better. The only way we can make it better is by tiering it. So effectively, in that tiered area, it's outside the LRDA. There's no way to bring that 8-foot wall in. It's the retaining part of it is where it's at.
Okay.
Does that
yes, I understand what you're saying. So that speaks, I think, to their first point. The second point was the request to exceed the maximum combined cut and fill depth, 6 feet, for development other than the main residence. You're saying part of that cut and fill will relate to the tiered retaining walls.
That's correct.
Is there something else speaking to the cut and fill?
It's reflective to the pool as well. There was a pool approved in the 80s that in fact was built, and the homeowner did in fact pull a demo permit and had that pool removed. So consistent again to the hillside, the cut and fill, in order to put the pool back, the pool will have to remain to a certain depth. And that's consistent to what you're seeing now is to keep it in that cut and fill to get the pool back in.
So if there were no pool, you could take care of the cut and fill?
It's still not going to resolve it. The pool's already there. The pool's already there. It was already pulled out. The cut and fill's already done. It's already there.
Yeah, but I heard earlier this evening that the suggestion was you essentially fill that portion of the cut.
No. Reflective to the cabana, not the pool.
Okay, so I was out there today, and it's quite a hill to walk up. But as you get to the first level, before you get to, well, as you get to the house, and you look in the backyard, and is that the cut we're speaking of?
There's east and west. The deepest part was where the existing pool was, where it was permitted to come out by permit. On the right side is what staff is referring to, which is the right side. There was in fact a small mound of 2.6 feet. That's primarily what they're talking about on the east side. We have suggested to continue the retaining walls at the tiered level because of the homeowner behind is concerned. He's concerned about the hillside. And we're concerned about the hillside. We feel it's a much safer resolve by putting in the tiered retaining walls, even though it's effectively outside of the LRDA. We feel at the end of the day, by cutting and filling that specific area, will help with the hillside from a safe standpoint.
Okay, I think they're going to put a map up there. Maybe you can walk us through it. Oh, that's not so good. Okay.
So it's the highlighted yellow area that we're referring to.
And that is actually what I was talking about, because when I walked up there and I walked around the side, that I did see that. And you're saying rather than fill that, because it's a depression, explain to me what you want to do with that.
We feel it's in the best interest of not just our current homeowner, but the homeowner behind. The slope from the left-hand side goes from a 30% to maybe 8 or 10, 12%. We want to protect that side by continuing the retaining walls, to tier it, to bring it into the hillside standards, to protect not only his property, but the neighbor's property behind as well. We feel it's safer in the long run. We feel that it's more effective, and the hill's already been cut. Let's make it better. I don't think the fill is going to resolve it, in my professional opinion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudes?
In discussions with the staff and in this recent conversation, do you see a way to fix the retaining wall issue and the hillside issue without exceeding the maximum combined cut and fill depth of 6 feet, and without having to grade outside of the LRDA?
Part of the staff's requirements or wishes is to bring this house into the LRDA and hillside standards as much as we could possibly get it. Right now, it's not consistent. What's there now on the hillside is not consistent with what you would approve today. It's not safe. You've got an 8-foot retaining wall from the bulb to the highlighted area. It's not safe. It's 8 feet tall. It's not. It shouldn't be 8 feet tall. So in order to get that, unfortunately, we're outside of the LRDA. In order to correct that, we need to fix it. We need to fix it by tearing the walls, which are the current standards.
Oh, could I follow up on that?
Sure, Commissioner Hudes.
So it sounds like you're not able to meet the requirement of the request to grade outside of the LRDA.
I don't see a way to doing it.
But there's a second issue, which is the maximum combined cut and fill depth, 6 feet, and I think staff pointed out that you were requesting 6.5 feet.
Correct.
Can that one be?
It can be brought to 6 feet if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hanson?
I probably want to ask staff for confirmation, but there was nothing in our staff report indicating that the current retaining wall was outside of the LRDA. So I hear what you're saying. You're saying it is, and then maybe staff can confirm that it is, because that certainly has a factor. What I really wanted to understand, though, is I get your professional opinion. To what extent has a professional soils engineer come in and looked at this situation and given a written opinion that this is the best way to preserve the hillside? Because that's the real validation of whether, this would be the right thing to do, especially when you're going to go outside of the hillside guidelines. So has a professional soil engineer come in and given a written opinion and done all the soil testing and stuff that we required to make that determination that that was the right thing to do?
Being in business for 30 years and building hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes in the hillside and bringing a staff to this, engineers, PSIs, bringing everybody to this site, we've all determined that we feel that this is the best use of this property, that we feel it's the safest use of the hillside.
But was any of those people, it's in the terms and conditions of approval. Were you to get approval to do so, you couldn't move forward with your permit without having a soils engineer, soils test, and all of the requisite plans approved by a soils engineer?
He's sitting in the audience. He will speak shortly. Yeah.
All right, any further questions? Vice Chair Kane?
Mr. McGrath, when were you hired to salvage the project?
I'm on this 5 months now, I think. So it was, let's see, he got red tagged in March.
I red tagged over a year ago. That's where my question is going to. We were up there and it was pouring, raining, and it added to the ambiance. But the house is held up by plywood. It's all plywood. That's because all those walls were taken down, and so it's had plywood up there for perhaps a year. There's windows missing. The rain is going inside. What am I missing as to why this property was allowed to be in that condition for a year, and is it still safe?
That's a legitimate question. Once you receive a red tag, you can't step foot back on the property. Now, before we can move forward, when we do get the approval, before we can move forward, the very first thing that we need to do as a professional, we need to get an engineer, our structural engineer, to sign off that the house is safe. And what is not safe will need to be replaced. I mean, that's just, unfortunately, when you get a red tag property that sits in the weather, this is part of the course. We have to do that. We have to make sure the engineer signs off prior to doing anything.
I guess there's nothing that can be done about the height because it's existing.
Correct.
But we stood at the bottom of the house, just off the cliff, which is more than 30% drop off on the other side of the driveway, and I'm sure that hill used to continue up at the same angle. And we stood at the garages, and looking up, I see a 3-story building in the hillsides. My issue with that is to the degree it's germane, is what you're up against. There's a 3-side monster up there, and I wish I could do something about it. minimizing the damage to the owner, but maximizing reclamation of that hill. It's a 3-story, very big white elephant. I'd like to, is there a structural way to reduce that height?
Because of where the garage sits, it's roughly 1,400 square feet underneath the house, and it's not a full, it's partial into the hill. So yes, there was in 1982 when the house was built, there was some grading done to accept it. The only way to reduce the mass, we feel, as a collective professional group, the only way we can reduce the mass is by making it disappear into the hill. And by doing that is by adding stone, by adding LRV values to bring it consistent to the hillside, to bring it to a capacity that it disappears as much as we can possibly make it disappear. When it was white, it was pretty prevalent, but we're trying to make it, disappear into the hillside. Structurally, there's nothing you can do. It is what it is.
Well, I thank you again for your dialogue.
Any further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. McGrath. I do have a speaker card from Robert Nickel. I believe you are part of the applicant, so did you plan on speaking tonight, or because I believe the time has passed? Pardon me? All right. You still have some time.
So Soli touched on most of the items of where we. Oh, hi. I'm Robert Nickel, the homeowner. I just wanted to address you briefly here. Soli answered most of the technical questions and a lot of the things that had transpired. So I purchased the home in December 2014, hired the wrong contractor. Some things had not went according to plan and were not followed per the town rules. I accept the fault there. Once we were red tagged, I went to get the right team together. I hired some additional people who were not qualified for the particular hillside standards of this particular town, who were not as experienced, and then I had to work through those issues, so that's why it's taken so long. Once I got the right team with Soli and his architects, his engineers, so on and so forth, we felt that we have done all of the due diligence and all of the reports and engineering and architectural reviews and landscaping plans and so on and so forth to try to meet all of the standards, and therefore we're here today, a year and 4 months later, and that's pretty much all I have to say. Any questions?
Vice Chair Kane?
I am sorry for your situation. It's never easy to deal with the human beings behind a project that is not popular. It's not personal, I assure you. The language we have to work with says that exceptions may be granted with compelling reasons for giving those exceptions. For you or for Mr. McGrath, what are those compelling reasons why you should have these exceptions?
So I took this project and didn't understand the true severity of it, and it was kind of to my own ignorance, so I take the blame for that. Now, the home is currently in the height. It currently is the particular height it is. It currently is the particular size it is. And we're doing everything in our means to put together the type of plans and reports for your group, the Planning Commission, to try to meet all of the standards. So we've done everything we feel that we can do to work with the existing shell of the home to help me salvage the shell of the home and not have to cut it in half. And basically, by doing all of the due diligence over the last year plus to get the proper plans and engineering reports and so on and so forth, we feel like we've done everything we can, and that's why we're here today to discuss these last few items that are still outstanding.
I'm going to rephrase my question. We have language that allows us to give an exception if there is a compelling reason, Mr. McGrath. Now, there are two items here, as Commissioner O'Donnell pointed out to you, that if rectified, the project goes forward. So for me to give exceptions to those to give approval for those 2 exceptions that you want, I have to have compelling reason. But Madam Chair.
Mr. McGrath.
Do you understand my question? Yeah. You got 2 obstacles. Give me compelling reasons to provide an exception.
I guess concerning the cabana for sure can be moved. So if it pleases the chair, the committee, then we're prepared to do that. If so, instead of arguing for it, if it's really that concerning to the group, then we'll move it. Then we'll either remove it or move it to get it into where it needs to be.
So at this point, there may not be compelling reasons. Rather, there may be a possibility of not doing what you want or undoing what you did in order to comply with the hillside. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I have a question. So I'm trying to validate what happened here to begin with to put you in this situation. So it's pretty egregious activity on the part of the contractor that you originally hired that's a friend of a friend that's nowhere to be found. So do you have a name of the contractor where you were able to at least report him maybe to the Better Business Bureau? Because when you make a big investment in a home like this, typically you could stand to lose some pretty good assets without making sure the contractor is properly licensed, bonded, and insured. So is...
Yeah, it's definitely been a painful lesson to learn financially, emotionally, so on and so forth. But I have a first name and a phone number. I don't know if that
You don't have his last name of a contractor that you hired to do work on probably a $3 million home?
Like I said, I have his first name and a phone number.
Thank you. Any further questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
As I previously asked you about the staff's comments on page 12, and I think you've answered them, but I want to be clear on them. You said, they make 2 points there. One is that you graded outside of the LRDA in the rear yard. My understanding your answer was, the reason we can't repair that is we really need some retaining walls there. And those retaining walls will be in the LRDA, and there's no way to get around that. And in fact, instead of having one retaining wall, you want to have stepped retaining walls. Is that correct? And if you don't do that, it's dangerous. Okay. Well, I think a 6 or 8 foot drop is fairly dangerous. Then secondly, you said the request to exceed the maximum combined cut and fill depth for development other than the main residence. Now here I perhaps don't recall precisely, but I asked you about that too, and you explained to me, and I would like you to explain again, why you think it is either you can't do it or it would be unwise to do it, i.e. unsafe.
Since the cut and fill is already done, since the cut and fill is already taken place, why not make it safer? Why not, instead of putting fill back, why don't we put the retaining walls in to protect the hillside as it should be?
But let me understand. If you simply put the dirt back, okay, you're saying that would not have the same value as putting the retaining walls in to slow or impede or stop earth movement?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will now invite comments from members of the public. Our first speaker will be Lee Quintana.
Actually didn't plan on speaking on this, but there are a couple of points that I'd like to bring up. One is that the wording on the exceptions to maximum floor area is the Town Council or Planning Commission may approve residential projects greater than the maximum allowed floor area, but it is not guaranteed when all of the following conditions apply. Now, one of those following conditions is all standards and applicable guidelines are being met. So it seems like there's somewhat of a catch-22 here. Since the technical demo, even revised, is above the allowed square footage, by this, it can't be allowed because it doesn't meet the standards for the grading. Now, if you want an exception for the grading because of safety reasons, then it would seem that you can't ask for an exception to the square footage and the height, etc. I feel for this person. I'm sorry, I went through this in another smaller way, but just the same, and it's mind-boggling, emotional, financially disastrous, etc. But that's what our guidelines say. It seems like you need one or the other. The other thing I would like to comment on is that I don't think that at this point you as a commission have adequate information on the geotechnical aspects of the site and the engineering aspects of retaining walls and whether you can repair hillsides, etc. You just have what the applicant is saying, and I'm not saying that he's not telling the truth, but it would seem to me that this is important enough to ask for geotechnical reports and a peer review. So I would ask that you continue the project. Otherwise, you have to decide one way or the other. Either they get the cut exceptions and they have to do more work on making the house smaller, or...
Don't go away. We have a question from Vice Chair Kane.
No,
I think it's a conundrum.
For the record, you are Ms. Quintana?
I am Ms. Quintana.
Thank you.
Or Mrs. Quintana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say that. Thank you for making that correction.
My bad. Commissioner O'Donnell.
This is not a question to the speaker, but I think she raises a good point. I think supposedly we have an engineer tonight, geotechnical engineer, and that's correct. But if we do, it might be nice to have that person come forward so we could ask some questions.
All right. That being said, our next speaker is Rick Tinsley, who I'm going to hope is the engineer. No. All right. Well, all right. Since we are taking comments from members of the public at this time, I will call Rick Tinsley, who is not the engineer.
Good evening. I'm Rick Tinsley. I'm a neighbor. I'm actually an engineer, but electrical engineer, so I can't help you with this. I'm the neighbor immediately to the north of this property, so if you're on the property and you look to the north where that big retaining wall is, where the pool used to be, I'm right up above there. So I'm keenly interested. I've lived there for 15 years, very familiar with the property. And Commissioner Kane, it's polite to call the former property a white elephant. We called it things far more disparaging than that. So I don't know if you know the history of this house. This was vacant when Mr. Nichols bought it. It had been vacant for some time before that. It had been a rental house for several years before that. It's been a long time since the previous owner, the Gummalls, actually lived in the house, and Ms. Gummall was very elderly. Suffice to say, this property had not had a lot of love for a long time. So I think certainly myself, and I know some of the other neighbors, were pleased that someone had finally bought the property and was going to actually, make it look nice again, because it hadn't looked nice. Frankly, the style never looked nice to me. Can't imagine it was actually approved in '82. But we were all hopeful that finally someone's going to clean up the old Gummall place. I met Mr. Nichols shortly after he bought the property, I think around January or February, and I only mention that to say that I know it may sound strange, it sounds strange to me, but I do believe this, at the time I thought this is a very sincere young man who's in for one hell of an education about housing in Los Gatos. But I do take him at his word. I think he hired the wrong people, realized that, and has been trying to rectify that since. That his letter actually, I believe, was sincere based on my observations with him a year or so ago. So I'm keenly interested in the property being fixed up. It has been vacant and essentially stripped naked for a year, so we thought it looked bad before. It really looks bad now. It's become a popular place for kids to park and smoke pot and drink beer. Obviously, in the condition the house is in, it's a safety issue, so I'm quite concerned about the amount of time this has taken. Granted, part of that was because of the problems that Mr. Nichols had and the contractor he hired originally and so forth. But at this point, I'm here to request that the planning department just make a decision, mete out whatever punishment Mr. Nichols is due in your estimation, and please let him get on with the project, because we're really, really tired of looking at it. And to think this could drag out for another year or more before something good starts to happen with the property, it's really, really concerning to me and to many of the other neighbors in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tinsley. Don't go away. Vice Chair Kane.
It's not an issue of punishment. I know you may have used the word loosely. If work is done without a permit, that's where you get into fines and double fees, and all of that is behind us. So, you know, he's got enough trouble without thinking that we're into punishment. We're not. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you.
Don't go away. Commissioner Birch.
Prior to any work happening out there, was there any neighborhood outreach? Were you reached by the contractor, the applicant, to let them know that work would be happening on the site?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Although in my estimation, that almost never happens in this town. It's never happened before when any of my other neighbors did work, so.
All right, thank you.
No further questions? All right, we will now allow the applicant and their team 5 minutes to add any further comments about the application, and if we are going to be bringing the engineer up, I would need to get a speaker card filled out as well. He can do it afterwards, but just to put him on notice that he does need to fill it out.
Hello all. I'm actually the civil engineer, not the geotechnical engineer. I did work on the grading. I worked with Aaron and the Public Works. I was hired back in 2015, beginning of last year, and I'm also a professional land surveyor. So I spoke with the architect at the time, and I told him we really need to get the facts of what's going on here, and that's what we did at that time. We had a challenge because obviously when I came in 2015, the grade was what it was. So I didn't have an existing topo that represented what was there before the violation. So that took a few back and forth with planning and public works to determine a surface that we could both agree on, that we're calling the existing or the GIS version of what was there before. That surface still is very steep. In some portions it's 80%. And we can go on with the technical issues, but it's very steep, and the tiered wall solution, I think, was the best we can do for the current condition. I understand what Aaron has highlighted here. I think this this portion to the right that she's saying, it was a desire, I don't know the history of it as an engineer, is a desire that somebody wanted a new cabana there. It was at a total different elevation than it shows right now. And, as an engineer being hired, I try to accommodate that as best I can. So we still continue the tiered walls around that. And in our last meeting we had with Planning and Public Works, we came to the conclusion that we could lower that cabana even further to meet the 6-foot cut and fill requirement. Now, in my opinion, I've done calculations of that, and I think we meet that. We could massage that if that needs to go up or down a little bit. We can do that. So that takes care of one aspect of that, but it doesn't take care of the issue that we're putting retaining walls in that area. And as a civil engineer, it's I understand why she's saying that could go to an existing slope. I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just saying that what I try to do here is a balance of the request of the owner and the hillside design guidelines, and meeting frequently with the planners and Public Works to kind of come up with what I feel is the best outcome with maintaining an existing structure. So, and one more thing I would like to add on the pool cut and fill section, the cut and fill on the pool. I did not account that because it's specifically there's an asterisk on your guidelines saying that a pool excavation is not counted towards a cut and fill maximum. So I did not account for that. So I just want to clarify that.
All right, you still have time remaining, so whether it be Mr. McGrath or Mr. Nickel wants to come back up to the podium before we take questions. Would either of you like to come up to the podium? You still have time. That's about ready to expire now.
So at this point, I would just like to ask the commission to approve my project or this project, and we are willing to move the cabana or do massage things to with what you deem appropriate, and we're yeah. So.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nickel. We do have questions for you, I believe, so don't go away. And it may be for the engineer as well. Commissioner Hudes, I thought I saw your hand up.
Yeah, this is a question for the engineer.
Thought I was saved. But.
You may have said this, but I want to get right to the point. In your opinion, is the retaining wall an improvement, a safety improvement over the existing conditions, and is it an improvement over putting back fill and not putting the retaining wall in?
I'm not a geotechnical engineer, so I don't know, you know, the answer to that. I think the way I view it, it could go either way. You know, that's my honest opinion.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell has a question for you, sir.
I'm confused by that answer. It could go either way. I mean, that's something I could have said, and I'm just me. I'm not a lawyer. I am a lawyer, not an engineer. I'm a retired lawyer, please. But I'm confused by that because the explanation I got, which again made a lot of sense to a layman, was that the reason it wouldn't make any sense to refill that, put the fill back, was that the inclusion of these retaining walls outside the LRDA was an improvement and would, one, help deter or stop the movement of earth, which might otherwise move. Two, well, the idea was if you didn't put the retaining walls there, it would be an unsafe condition. Now, if I understand your answers, you say, well, maybe, maybe not. Is that your answer?
It is, because I'm not a soils engineer.
Well, if you're not a soils engineer, I don't know works, but if you say maybe, maybe not, I think there must be some basis.
I'm going off of 15 years of experience that I have, and I've seen where a fill is a good situation, and I've seen where it's not. So
if this were filled in and no retaining wall was placed there, that might be just as good as not filling it in and putting retaining walls. Is that right?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've seen it go both ways.
Okay, thank you. I accept that.
Let me answer that. Maybe I can help to clarify this.
Well, we wanted an engineer, and you're not, right?
We have one. We have he's not here. We have a geotechnical engineer on file that we've paid for the soils reports that has total reports, and if it satisfies the commission, we're happy to get the approval of that geotechnical engineer to approve this, if that satisfies everybody.
Well, I think a critical issue tonight, if we're to vote, is why do you need to build outside the LRDA? You told me, because if you didn't, it would impair the safety, i.e. the reason you were putting those retaining walls in. Okay, which made a lot of sense to me, but I know less than he does. Now he says, could not. And if that's the answer, then maybe we just say, okay, put all the fill back in, and that's the end of it. So I guess I need it's hard for us to make a decision beyond, we're not experts. We're supposed to listen to your experts. So as I understand it, you've given us your answer based on 30 years of experience, right?
Correct.
Your engineer has, I don't know, you said 15 years or whatever it was?
Civil engineer, yeah.
As I understand that, but a civil engineer, I have great respect for a civil engineer, and he says he doesn't know, or could go either way. So that puts me, at least, in a state of confusion.
I'm also confused, but I believe Vice Chair Kane has a question.
Can I just clarify this one?
Maybe I can clarify the clarification.
Okay, sure.
I think that's now moving to a moot point. The property owner said he will do what staff has asked. I think he should be given the opportunity to do that, and maybe we can move this forward to a day certain and look at it again. I don't know why we're going to argue about something he just said he will do, and that is the 2 points of contention and whatever else staff has. I'm thinking he's had enough hardship. Let's stop this, get in compliance, and we can go forward without mishing up any points that have been missed, because we're done. He said he'll do it.
Could we confirm?
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes, could we confirm, because if that's the case, I agree with you. Not my understanding, however, because the contractor has told us his opinion. The homeowner, I think in good faith, said, we'll do whatever's necessary. That doesn't tell me what's necessary. So if you want to say whatever somebody determines is necessary, staff's already determined, I believe, the only reason they're saying to turn this down is for the 2 reasons stated. So let me ask you one, just to clarify the Vice Chair's point. Are you telling us that you can correct the exceedance of the maximum combined cut and fill depth?
Yes.
Everybody agrees to that? Mm-hmm. Then I think he's absolutely right.
What is it?
I just want to be crystal clear on that.
We still have an open public hearing.
Yes, we can still ask questions of the applicant. Are there any further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Erickson.
And someone to Commissioner O'Donnell, and you would achieve that by?
Either lowering or raising the cabana or moving it or something. In my calculations, we're already there, but if I would have to meet with staff and see what they saw where we're not meeting it, and then we could work with them on that.
Right. So just so that I was sure that I understood what would happen, you would adjust the location of the cabana however necessary. We don't know. You've got to design that, and it's got to be tested and so forth. That's how you would achieve what we're asking you to achieve.
Correct, and it would be more a vertical because that's what would be the adjustment.
Yes, not moving it side to side. I understand that. Yeah.
Correct.
All right, Vice Chair Kane.
On occasion, we take 2 points of view. It seems logical to talk about specific things that need to be this and that. I'm not doing that. I'm saying comply with the guidelines. And if the owner says, I've had enough, and he certainly has, then you comply with the guidelines and live with the guidance that staff gives for you to bring back an application that's been amended and can be approved because it's in compliance. I'm not going to say specifically move this, do that, design, comply with the guidelines, make staff happy, bring it back.
Commissioner Hanson.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question based on what Commissioner O'Donnell said, as well as what was said. There's 2 conditions that that staff was flagging. One was the maximum allowable combined cut and fill depth. The other one was grading outside of the LRDA. So am I hearing that the applicant is willing to bring both of those into compliance?
The cut and fill would take care of item number 1 that you just said. Item number 2 is, in my opinion, is removing the cabana.
So it's technically possible to do that, but it would include the step of the cabana. But the cabana is not in the terms and conditions. It's the grading outside of the LRDA is what's out of compliance.
I'm not quite sure I followed you there, but
there's a line in the property that says the least restrictive development area, and the condition that would require an exception would be allowing grading outside of that least restrictive development area.
So like I said, I think in my opinion, what's taking out of that zone in that area, and I agree with staff, is a cabana. So that I can't, you know, I don't know if we can move it, if the size changes, but as it's currently designed, that's what's taking us out of that restriction.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. My question still stands. I think, though, that because what the commission has to approve is ultimately is when we see the application back, is that these two conditions are addressed.
All right, I am going to stop for just a moment because I believe our Community Development Director, Joel Paulson, would like to speak.
These are, thank you, Chair. These are all very important issues. I think we have confirmation from the applicant and their team that they're willing to comply with the two exceptions. Staff will work with them to restore the site back to as close to it was prior to the illegal grading occurring. And then from there, we will look at LRDA and maximum cut and fill depths, and that will be a condition which may mean they can have a cabana, may mean they can't, may mean they need to relocate their retaining walls, and so staff will handle that at staff level with the additional condition to that effect.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, we need a first. Is there further discussion or questions for the applicant? Seeing none, the public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. You may sit down. Thank you. All right. Commissioners, do you have any questions, comments, or entertain a motion? Commissioner Birch.
I just have a quick question for staff. One of the things that was mentioned is as this building has sat for over a year in the weather, there's obviously going to need to be a structural engineer that is going to come and need to verify the roof and the walls and so forth. So let's say the structural engineer comes back and says, actually, there's now a lot of rot. The roof will no longer hold the proposed weight, and now we are going to need to demo half the house. We've already gone through this process. Would we see another site and architectural application for that resubmittal, or?
You would not. Architecture and site is demo, technical demo, regardless. So you would not see the home back in that case.
So if that's the case, can we make, if obviously the house already exceeds the height, the size. So, but if we make conditions, can we make conditions that then, under that unfortunate circumstances, which God forbid, I mean, that would just be horrible, but that it doesn't exceed the size and height that's been proposed in this application?
I think we can definitely guarantee that the footprint and the height would not change from what is being approved this evening.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Kane.
In staff's report, they give us recommendations on procedure and alternatives, and one of the alternatives constitutes my motion. I move that, given what's been said and the applicant's stated agreement to be within staff's guidelines on the two salient points and any other points for that matter, that you comply with the hillside standards, I move that the matter be moved to a date certain with the specific direction that I've given.
All right, Commissioner Birch.
Can I ask the maker of the motion a question of if we are going to direct the applicant to meet these guidelines and work with staff, do we need to see that again, or can we just entrust that they will meet staff's guidelines and the hillside guidelines for grading as requested by staff?
Even if it was a consent item with staff's approval, I'd like to see it one more time.
Okay.
I have a question.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Of the maker, I had understood that staff had recommended two things that have now been agreed to. The maker of the motion says, and such other guidelines basically as may exist. I haven't heard any testimony about the application of such other guidelines as may exist, so I'd like to ask staff if is that your intention? That's what they're going to do?
So as I understood the Vice Chair's motion, it was that they were using the alternative motion for approval with the exception of the comments in subsection E, which speak to grading outside the LRDA and the maximum combined cut and fill depth of 6 feet. So those two exceptions would not be made, so we would work with them to come into compliance with those two requirements.
The question, though, is are there some guidelines that we have not discussed this evening which would otherwise apply?
Not that staff is concerned with.
Okay, thank you. I'll second the motion.
All right, Commissioner O'Donnell has seconded the motion. Any discussion? Commissioner Birch?
I'm sorry, I'm still going to plead with you guys' this kinder heart of why do we need to see this again? I'm just saying that we have clear direction from staff, and I completely trust staff to make sure that this falls in their compliance without them paying a mortgage payment for another month on a house they can't live in. And I know you have a kind heart, so I'm pleading with it.
I look to the town attorney for advice on this. So can we do what's being recommended by Commissioner Birch?
Absolutely.
I could modify the motion or withdraw it, and you can make one.
I believe you just modify it for staff to verify your motion can stand. Just take that one little sentence out.
I take that one little sentence out.
All right, does the seconder accept the modification?
The one sentence, as I understand it, is it does not have to come back to us so long as it is consistent with the motion and it satisfies staff.
Correct. It's a motion to approve the application absent the requested exceptions for grading, subject to the conditions of approval set forth in the staff report and the findings set forth in the staff report.
I'll second that motion. All right.
All right.
Good.
Do we have further discussion? All right, I will call the question. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Paulson, are there appeal rights of the actions of the commission on this item?
There are appeal rights. Anyone who's not satisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission can appeal the decision to the town council. The forms are available in the clerk's office. There's a fee for filing the appeal, and the appeal must be filed within 10 days.
Thank you. And do you also have a report for us this evening?
I do not have a report other than was mentioned during verbal communications for me that next week we will be considering the architecture and site application for the Phase 1 North 40.
Can you confirm that we'll have a pretty large stack of speaker cards on hand?
I can confirm that we will have plenty of speaker cards.
All right, thank you. Do any members of the commission have an issue to bring to the attention of the commission? Commissioner Erickson.
So to follow up on what the chair and Mr. Paulson were just talking about, I would like to, so to the extent that I understand, I'm going to oversimplify this, but when we conduct the next hearing, the issue will not be, is in kind of lay terms, will not be whether or not we will have a project at the North 40. But the question is basically, is the application that we'll be considering consistent with the specific plan? So while we can't preclude the public from saying whatever they would like to say with respect to a project, to the extent that we could help the public understand the distinction between those two issues, and to the extent that we could help them understand to focus their comments on whether or not the application that's under consideration is consistent with the specific plan, I think that would be helpful. It doesn't seem like to me it's very helpful either to the public, to the Planning Commission, or to the ultimate potential deciders, the town council, for us to have a number of people come before us to say they don't want to see any development or they don't want to see anything go forward on that site for whatever reason they have, because there's traffic issues that they're concerned about. Whatever their reasons are, that doesn't seem like to me to be very helpful, doesn't seem to be very good use of the commission's time, the staff's time, or I would say the public's time to listen to that kind of testimony. I don't mean that to be offensive to anyone, but we're down the road. The ship has sailed on certain issues, and to the extent that the chair and the staff could help the public that will come understand the distinction of those two, I think it would be well advised.
Thank you for those comments. I agree with you, Commissioner Erickson. Commissioner Hansen, you have a hand up?
I just wanted to add something onto what Commissioner Erickson said. I've seen on Nextdoor exactly that is the intent of many residents is to come to the public hearing. They were encouraging people to come to the hearing. Let's stop the North 40, and so I think it would be be very helpful, because I don't want the public to misunderstand that what the intent is and what's happening at the meeting, I think, or what they're able to accomplish at the meeting with their comments, even though they're free to say whatever they think. I know that people have been weighing in that they view this as an opportunity to stop the North 40. And I agree, I don't believe that's what we're being asked to consider, is whether or not to do it.
We'll do our best to frame the issues.
All right, thank you. Commissioners and staff, thank you for your time and hard work. Members of the audience, thank you for your participation this evening. This meeting's adjourned.